My name's Zach Batty. I'm with the eLearning Brothers. Thanks very much for being here. The two people that will be speaking about this we're really excited about. First of all, Frank Glover is the Senior Learning Strategist for Pacific Gas and Electric. In the last 4 years with PG&E, he has managed over 300 projects. Roughly 100 of them have been in tandem with the eLearning Brothers custom team. Frank is currently seeking his PhD in instructional design and online learning. His research is on the impact of adaptive multimedia learning solutions for children with autism spectrum disorder. Yeah, that's worth an applause for sure. Frank also works on a consultative basis with corporate clients implementing adaptive learning to achieve actionable results. Now, Bill West, the co-presenter. Bill is a world-renowned thought leader, author, and rock star in the e-learning industry, dating back to the 80s when tablet computing actually required a hammer and chisel. He's been at the forefront of education technology throughout its evolution. He's served over 100 clients, received over 30 industry awards, and incidentally plays a wicked lead guitar. So maybe they'll treat you to that later on. Without further ado, we turn the time over. Thanks very much.
Hey everybody. So we have the dreaded post-lunch time slot, and we will do our absolute best to keep you out of food coma. And actually, I kind of like it's a smaller group. We can get more intimate. So feel free to raise your hand and ask questions along the way. So as Zach mentioned, I'm Bill West. I've been in this industry for a really long time as a provider, as a vendor, working with Accenture, Ernst & Young, Xerox, GP, some of the larger guys, and then also working with some of the boutiques, my own companies, and then most recently with the eLearning Brothers. So I've had a chance to see a lot of different projects, a lot of successes, a lot of failures. A few years ago, I approached Brandon Hall, and I said, I think there's something in the industry that's wrong, and I can't put my finger on it, but I'm watching a lot of these relationships with vendors and clients fail, and I'd like to know more about why. So we did a research study, so we canvassed the industry, and we're going to share a lot of the results here that really highlighted why some of these relationships fall apart. And then the nature of the book and the 7 attributes is what can you do from the beginning of the selection and then throughout to make sure that relationship is successful. So Frank gets to play counterpoint, being one of our clients, gets to represent your side of the spectrum and say what works, what doesn't work. Frank?
My quote is pretty simple. Instructional design is really not about a set of processes, right? Instructional design is really about solving a problem. And it's really kind of a set of guiding principles based on some cognitive research. And so if you walk into a situation as a vendor to the client side, and you walk in there helping them solve a problem either from a performance standpoint or from the standpoint of helping them get a project back in line, you're already kind of stepping towards success. So.
Great. So I'll give you the headlines up front. Being an actual instructional designer, let's get to the objectives up front and we don't kill the headline. Most outsourcing relationships fail. We're going to give away a couple copies of the book, and I'll give the first copy away to anybody who can guess what percentage of outsourcing relationships typically end up in failure. How many? That's really close. So 72%, if you're outsourcing more than 50% of your business, 72% of the times the relationships will fail within the first 3 years. Now for a smaller organization, if you're outsourcing pieces, then it's more like 63%. But it's still a really, really scary number. So that's what drove me to try to figure this out. The responsibility for success is mutual. We'll have Frank talk an awful lot about, but trust, honesty, flexibility. We'll talk about some of the working mechanics required to really make this work. And then we'll get into what the book talked about, which is the success starts with the selection criteria. So we'll talk about what to look for when you are assessing your vendors. So first of all, what does success look like in a vendor relationship?
So they asked me to tell a story about one of our more successful projects, and those of you guys that have ever been involved in having almost an impossible situation. So early 2014, actually, we reached out to eLearning Brothers, and we had an idea of doing adaptive learning at PG&E. And we started off with 10 courses and got those launched. About March of 2015, I get a call from my senior director and says, listen, we're about to do a large profiling release, and we want to take these, what were 24 courses, and have them ready to go by April 1st. So we, in essence, had about 21 days to do 23 and a half hours of e-learning and transition them to old e-learning to an adaptive model, that including re-instructional design, doing the pre-tests. At first, I thought it was kind of a clever joke, but it wasn't. So I reached out to the custom, Todd, I think he's out there, and we got together, and in 18 days, we converted almost 24 hours of e-learning into an adaptive framework and launched it on April 1st. I mean, it literally was them, e-learning buddies, transferring files to us in SCORM format and us putting them up to the LMS all the way up till 8 a.m. that morning. What made that successful was the constant collaboration we had. We had a clear set of objectives, right? We knew what our deliverable had to be, and it was the flexibility and them, the ability for them to understand our circumstances and work together collaboratively through the entire process, constant check-ins. But yeah, we actually built 23 and a half hours of e-learning in 18 days, and that included Easter. So, pretty amazing project. So
that's crazy. That's crazy. One of my favorite successes is where we worked with a pharmaceutical organization on sales training as they're releasing the product, which obviously is very important. As the product's available, when the FDA approves it, you want your sales guys out on the field instantly. And what made it successful was the fact that we got involved 24 weeks before the product approval deadline. So we worked side by side with the company over a very long period of time to make sure what we ended up with would satisfy their needs, but also to make sure we didn't get caught up with timing or budget or anything of that nature. So it was actually a real partnership between us and the client over the period of time to map and mirror the process that they were going through. And as a vendor, that was tremendously exciting because there was a lot of collaboration, there was a lot of trust that was built, we were fundamentally embedded into the system, and that allowed us to be successful while we achieved our objectives. On the other end, you have the sinking ship of a failure. And one of the biggest failures I've seen in the industry are the large-scale outsourcing. And there seems to be this leapfrog where the big organizations will pick a vendor, 7 years later they'll fire the vendor, pick another vendor, and then 7 years later they'll fire that vendor and go back to the original vendor. And it's because they just never figured out how to make that relationship successful at all levels. That's the worst failure that I can imagine. Frank?
Oh, wow. Failures from a vendor standpoint, we've had everything from, and I've seen it, in even my consulting, great example. When I see the largest failure is when the vendor and client relationship is very transactional, right? It's not, like I say, it's not solving a problem. They're trying, the client will come to the vendor and say, I need training. Often, I need training, right? And I've seen instances where someone will build them, they haven't done any analysis, they haven't worked well with the client to understand their needs. Recently, I'll tell you one that was in particular PG&E where there was a place out of New Mexico that hired a firm to come in and literally build them training. They charged the client $210,000 to build them a 56-slide PowerPoint with no instructional design done to it. It looked like they bought it, and so, oftentimes when the person came in afterwards, right, came in to try to fix the problem, they had already blown through all their budget. They had to start from scratch. And of course, every vendor that came in after that, they were looked at skeptically, right? So I think a lot of times, and from the client side, we have to know exactly what we want and be able to properly articulate that and know what our expectations are. And it's also obviously on the vendor side to make sure that you're having integrity in what you're doing and give a quality product back.
So what is the definition of success? This is what I came up with in crafting the book. The first one is the client achieves their vision. Whatever that big idea was that you had when you set up on the project, you went out and found your vendor and partnered, if we can help you achieve that vision, you're going to see this as successful. From the vendor standpoint, the piece that people don't want to talk much about is that the vendor has to be able to run a healthy business. And so they must make a profit on the project. So it's a two-way street. We have to make sure that what we're delivering to you is what you want, but at the same time, I can afford to pay the people who do it, I can afford to pay my rent, and we can make a reasonable profit so that we can do the next project and stay in business. And that's a difficult part of the equation. We've got a client situation now where the payment is a net 65, and then they have a 15% accumulation process on top of that. So do the math. By the time we finish the project, we finally get our first payment for the project. So the vendor has to support the entire staff and all those expenses to get to the end before they ever got paid in that scenario. It's really tough. So when you find that scenario, basically what happens is you may not get the A-team, because the A-team is going to go to the one that's driving a higher profit. Or the company itself really may have a hard time staying in business because the cash flow is not there. So those two pieces have to be in balance, and if they are, amazing things happen. You got the A-team, the business is comfortable, the vendor's comfortable, we're sitting around talking about innovation and new ideas and really having a good time. Yeah, Christopher.
From your perspective, what's a good profit margin? We talk about profit. What's a good average based on your clients?
Yeah. You know, it varies, but if you look at the way most of the rate structures are set up, typically the vendor is looking at a 50% gross margin. So if it costs me $60 an hour to pay the person, then $120 an hour is probably what I'm going to charge, because at least half or more of that's got to go into supporting the business. So the sales guys who gets the next one, and the account manager that supports yours. And so if a really good vendor organization can come back with a 10, 15, 20% margin on the bottom line, that allows me to pay the bills without living paycheck by paycheck, put some reserve and start the build up. So I think that's what I see a lot average, and that's a really healthy situation. Yeah.
Well, I don't have too much more to add to that. I mean, because on the client side, success can mean a million different things as far as metrics and anything else. But at the end of the day, I always consider a vendor client when I found a partner. You know, if any time that I work with a vendor and I find that I now have a partnership that can continue on and I can reach out at any time for the next project, then it's been successful.
All right, so sometimes outsourcing is a bad word. People are intimidated by the idea of outsourcing. They don't want to go to a vendor. And so we thought I'd take a second here to talk about why do companies bother outsourcing? Why don't they just do it themselves? Why pay the extra money for a vendor? Frank?
I mean, simply, from a client side, if I'm reaching out to a vendor, I need larger capacity, right? I need a level of expertise that I currently don't have in-house. And so, you know, in essence, if I'm reaching out to you as a vendor, I am looking for someone of high competence, if not expertise, and someone that can actually help me achieve my ends. You know, we were talking about this kind of a little bit earlier, that this is not exactly an analogy, but I just give you an example that you, on a client side, I'm assuming that I have someone when I go out, and how do I determine that they're good? I always go back to the story. When I was in my 30s, I was on a local school board, and we got to the point where we were hiring a new superintendent. And so you go through and you get these 12 resumes of these. Everyone has a doctorate or a PhD. They all had great resumes, great letters of reference, right? And we got the interview process. We started determining, you know, were these people a right fit? Well, myself and another board member asked for two questions that were purely about actually doing the job, right? Here's a situation. Take your expertise, your years of experience, and give me something back. That list of 12 superintendent candidates got down to 2. And with 2 questions, simply by asking them to actually do the job. Give us something that showed you that all these years of experience, all these references that you have is actually going to be applicable to what we're looking for and what we need. So a portfolio is a good indicator, right? But getting the right people on board, it may take, my advice to you is find a way, a mechanism that you feel confident that they can actually fulfill the role they need you to fill when you step on board. And there was years when I was, before I went kind of corporate, I was doing it. Believe me, I had some times where I faked it till I made it, but I've now found kind of being on the other side of things, right? It's so much better to have people that you know you can trust when you dial that phone. They're going to be able to get you the work done, and you're not putting yourself on the line. Because honestly, from our side on the client, I always have to justify why I selected said people, or why a project may or may not be on task. The last thing you want to be is on the vendor side is because the vendor didn't meet their needs, right? You always want to be the ones that you're on the positive side of the solution.
Great. So let's look at some of the data. I mentioned the survey. The data that came back, why do people outsource? And these are the key areas. Typically, it's just to increase capacity. So most corporations can't afford to just have a training department of 50 people sitting around waiting for the next project to show up. So what you need is a team that you can rely on that will show up when there's a project, go away and the project's done, and then be able to come back again. So these are the key reasons: increased staff capacity, increased capabilities. For those that were in the previous session with Mike Ruska, he showed the e-learning ecosystem map. There's a lot of really cool stuff that's possible now, and it's really hard for any one organization to really understand it. So being able to go out and find somebody who really understands adaptive learning, or understands mobile learning, or understands operations and XAPI and such, your ability to go out and find those people and assemble them. Faster development, because the only reason the vendor's there is to do your job so they can get in and get it done. Access to innovation, which is growing, because it's a really exciting time, personally. It does reduce development costs because there's no overhead, you're just paying for what you get. And then sometimes it's access subject matter SME expertise. It's a little redundant. But if you're doing sales training or leadership training or some sort of area where it is not your expertise, sometimes you can outsource a particular expert to tie in with that. Why do the relationships fail? This is some of the data that came back. The leading one was quality and effectiveness issues. We're going to return to each one of these when we talk about what we discovered about how to avoid these. Poor communications, or they're really difficult to work with. And then it goes on from there about delays, cost overruns, maybe they didn't bring the staff that they thought that they said that they would, and that staff can't meet their needs. You know, those are some of the secondary ones, but I really want to focus on the top ones. Quality and effectiveness issues, poor communications, and then delivery delays and cost overruns being the top four. So that's why they fail, but when we're looking to actually pick a vendor, what are we looking for? Some of the lower ones: ability to scale without losing quality, relationship with the account leaders. So if the number one reasons for firing a vendor is because the quality wasn't there and communications were bad, then those should be some of the very first things you look for when you're trying to find a vendor. Most people go straight to the bottom, looking at the qualifications of the staff of the vendor, and ignore some of the other areas. Technology, relationships, and process and maturity. Well, if the problem was getting the project done on time and doing it under budget, you would think those would be pretty important issues to look for up front. And this is what crafted the 7 attributes as part of the book. You got any thoughts on those?
Let's be honest, most of the times from a client side we have problems is someone over promises and under delivers. And the mechanics for why that ultimately happens generally is because they can't scale to the project, right? Yeah. They don't have the manpower of enough, and let's say in the terms of, let's say, e-learning, they may not have enough qualified developers to achieve what you need. And of course, then things start sliding. So, I mean, 99% of the time, I think it's often they promise more than they can ever honestly deliver.
Right. So let's take a look at what the 7 attributes are. So I'm going to take a look at each one individually, and then we'll go in a little bit more depth. And these are in order. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what they were, and then find out what the contingencies are. First is experience. Do they have experience in your industry, in your business, in the subject matter that you're going to teach, and does the person leading the project have the experience to do so? Just because they were rocking it on a compliance course for a pharmaceutical company doesn't mean they're qualified to lead a leadership program at a technology company. So aligning that experience between the two. The next is methodology. And not too many people talk about methodology often enough, but do they have one? You've got Michael Allen in the group, and obviously you guys know him. Deep-rooted philosophy, pedagogy, and methodology that drives what they do. So does your vendor have a methodology, or they just talk about ADDIE, which is not a methodology, it's just a process, right? Infrastructure was the one that jumped up that I didn't expect. When I was pulling this together, there were a lot of things I kind of expected would be an attribute, The ability to scale to your needs without sacrificing quality is absolutely huge. I think that's something you went to. If they have 20 people and you just gave them a project that requires 20 people, it's going to be really tough for that vendor. So do they have the infrastructure? Do they have a repeatable process? And does that process include the kinds of things that you need to be successful, such as user testing? And how do they interact with the SMEs? What are their processes for doing that? Technology, both the technology, are they compatible with the technology you have? And do they have their own supporting technology that makes things go faster? Whether it's the project management technology, how they share documents with you, how they might facilitate the SME review. Obviously, talent. Now, talent is always the number one thing people look for. I put it at number 6, because if you don't have the experience, process, technology, infrastructure to support that talent, they won't achieve their top capabilities and potential. So it's number 6. Without the infrastructure, it doesn't survive. And then finally, innovation. So everybody wants to talk about innovation. Everybody wants to do really cool stuff. But one of my clients once said, if you can't do the basic blocking and tackling, then I don't want to choose you for innovation. Any initial insight on the list?
No, my big thing would be, I agree with you on methodology. I will tell you that you're going to find one of the best things you guys can do is to almost interview the client as much as you're trying to get the job. You could find somebody that if they have a really strict internal process, right, that they want you to adhere to, that may or may not, if you don't have the ability to adapt to that and work within their very strict process, or if you have a client that doesn't have one, you obviously have to have one yourself so you can align to it. But honestly, we talked about this a little bit. One of the toughest, I think, for vendors going into a large corporate environment, especially one that has, let's say, an internal learning, like we have an academy, they may have a large learning or talent department, is finding a way to both support them and be a great vendor and resource, and at the same time not be threatening and compete, right? It's finding that balance that you're truly a solution-oriented, because I know we've had it. We've had it where we brought in e-learning developers or anyone else, and it's internally you hear the dialogue of, are they going to replace us? Are they eventually going to take work away from us? And so as a vendor and working with the client, understanding your role and how you can best augment them and not put them on the defensive, but also being aware enough that maybe some circumstances are better for you to walk away. If you feel it's not going to be a good situation for you, you can't be successful as a vendor. I know that's tough in a world where you're trying to gain business, but sometimes you might find it beneficial to say, you know what, this is not the project that I should be partaking in.
Excellent. So we summarized the whole thing in the book, Rockstar Vendors. So everything I'm about to cover will be in there. If you want a copy at the end, just come on up. I'll give you a copy of the book. So first of all is experience. So everybody's business is different. Whether you're in medical devices, pharmaceutical, technology, healthcare, banking, you name it, energy, everything is different. So the question to the vendor is, do they have the experience in your industry? Do they have the narrative and the dialogue to be able to have a healthy conversation with you about the things, or are they learning along the way, right? What's the experience level of their IDs? Are they self-trained? Do they have master's degrees? Are they PhDs? What's the level, and what level do you need for the particular problem you're trying to solve? What's the ongoing day-to-day experience feel like with the subject matter experts? We all know that is numero uno, the most important thing. If the SMEs don't like the vendor, the project will not be successful. Bottom line, right? And then demonstrated quality of their work. When you ask us to show you, and we do this, you ask us to show examples of the work, I will show you the coolest, most awesome, award-winning stuff we've ever done. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're paying for. So if you know what your budget is and you know what you're looking for, ask the vendor for examples of that fits within that, right? A couple things. You don't have to settle for one vendor. One of the things that our organization is doing is actually building a strategic alliance with multiple vendors. The world's just too big and complicated right now for one vendor to serve all of your needs, even if it's one of the larger organizations. They often sub out. So it's okay to use more than one vendor for different types of capabilities. And the big question to ask the vendor during the selection process, have they ever been fired and why? Everyone's got a story. We're not all perfect. We all lose an account. Understanding why and understanding how they responded to it is ridiculously important, and you'll learn an awful lot. I think that's how you got from 12 to 2 on your selection campaign with the experience. Yeah. Number 2, methodology. And organizations don't talk about methodology often enough, so let me try to illustrate it. All right. What is their philosophy? Is it performance-based design? Does it focus on the 3 C's? Is it focused on 6 dimensions? What is our 6 disciplines? Find out how they train their IDs and the philosophy the IDs use when they apply. This is one illustration. Just because I can do a mass production of level 100 courses does not mean I'm qualified to do one 400 level course. All right? Just because I can crank out, 24 systems courses to support an SAP implementation for a manufacturing organization, and I may just rock that. I could be really good at that. But it doesn't mean you want to hire me to do your leadership training in a technology organization, right? So make sure the methodology they have will basically adapt to either volume, is it one project, or is it a mass outsourcing campaign, and also to the level, is it a rapid development or is it a immersive development? Feel free to chime in.
No, the only thing I would add to that is, if you have a methodology, have it, but also be able to clearly articulate it to the client. So we'll talk a little bit more about process, but you know what? Not everyone understands how, even Addy, how Addy were to work or anything else, but what does an alpha really look like? What's the expert? What is what is a beta? What are those? What do they actually look like? And what are those expectations? So you oftentimes will be able to guide the client, or like I say, otherwise, or if you know that they have a very fixed methodology or process, that you're able to articulate how it is like theirs. So get a good understanding of how they approach learning and development as well.
The next one is infrastructure, and this really was the surprise to me when we did the research. And the top line is the ability to sustain scalability without sacrificing quality. Do they maintain a healthy utilization, and do they maintain a healthy bench, right? What you don't want is an organization that uses just-in-time staffing. Now, I worked for one of the larger organizations where, because of the way the organization itself was set up, meaning to hire an inside individual, you guys probably have to deal with this. You got to have a budget, you have to have the job opening, you have to post the job, you have to hire the person, you have to go through the interview process. A lot of corporations deal this. It doesn't work in a vendor situation. If I have to wait until you're ready to hire me to then go out and find the people, right? Either 2 things are going to happen. Either it's going to be delayed, it's going to take me a while to find the right person, or I'm going to end up finding anyone on the street that fits and put a badge on them and send them your way. Just-in-time staffing is absolutely detrimental to a healthy vendor organization. So what does their bench look like? Ask about the recruiting process and ask about how they train their employees. What does that onboarding process look like? Do they actually have the talent is the question. All right. This is one area where the larger organizations have the ability to do well because they can add more people quicker because they have existing people who can train and mentor and coach them in. A little bit harder for the smaller organizations to do that. So while I wouldn't endorse a massive organization all the time, even though I work for them, it is definitely important to make sure the company you're talking to has capacity to be able to absorb your project and do so with quality. Okay, now process. This is where you get into Addy. This is where you get into how do they actually do the work. Depending on the project, depending on the work, different projects are fine. If it is a rapid development of a lot of existing materials into an online format, then a transactional waterfall process may work just fine. But if it's an immersive or performance-based subject or challenging topic, you're probably going to want something that's a little bit more iterative. I always called it get it wrong as fast as you can. I'm not sure exactly what the catchphrase is for Sam, but the idea is that aha moment, right? You get something in front of the client so they can respond. And even if it's completely wrong, now at least you know where you're starting. As opposed to organizations that do the interviews, go off for 4 weeks, come back with a bunch of storyboards, and then you find out it's not quite what they want. or it's storyboards on paper, and that's not exactly what I asked for. I want an online course. So when you get it online, let me know, because then I can react to it, right? So fail early, fail often. Real user testing. The one phrase I always use is there's really no reason to do user testing unless you want the project to be successful. If you want to know that it actually works, you might want to throw it across a couple users before you roll it out to the general population and make sure. But do it early and do it often. Is the process SME friendly? The SMEs are busy, and no matter how much in their heart your project is important to them and how much they say they can commit time, they are busy. They will miss deadlines. It will not work as planned. So is the vendor's process flexible enough that it can adjust to those types of things? So that if it is delayed, some SMEs may like an entire module to review at a time. Some SMEs may just want 300-word paragraphs at a time. Whatever style they need, the process has to be able to adapt to it. I think one of the other key ones is it an all-in-one or is it a cross-functional team? Are they assigning individuals that do the analysis, do the storyboard, do the development, and help deliver? Or are they assigning a team where there is an instructional designer and there is a writer and a different developer and such, and how are they approaching it? And which one of those works best for what you're trying to achieve? Process was pretty important to you.
Yeah, well, I would tell you this. There may not be a single more important item that you deal with any organization is subject matter expert management or how you relate with them. You have on the one scale, you could have a subject matter expert that you can never get in touch with, right? And you're trying to get things done and the timeline keeps moving and you can't get them to give you the information. That's the one end. Then you have the SME that's owned the content for a decade and has been teaching that PowerPoint because they're not only the subject matter expert, but they're also the trainer. So you have so your ability to work with either the project manager or whoever is helping you get that project along, that you as the vendor clearly articulate how you're going to use that subject matter expert to achieve your ends. Because you will find that as whether it be at alpha, any stage of review, you're asking someone to be critical, right? Or to critique. Well, you're going to find that once you do that, they're going to be critical. And how you are able to manage those expectations, right? And then deal with those subject matter experts' wants is going to, and how you use your project managers to help manage those will a lot of times determine whether your project is successful. Nothing will undermine a project quicker than an SME that's not giving you the information or helping you achieve what you need to. Yeah.
The next is technology. And it wasn't that long ago that the focus on technology was how they support their own business. Because what they were using to build your product typically wasn't very complicated. There were a couple authoring systems, there was an LMS in the back end, and so there was SCORM in the middle, and there was a lot of assumptions you can make that it was going to work. So I would focus on what's the technology that the vendor is using to manage their business. Do they have an internal management system or is it all on spreadsheets? How are they interacting with you to share documents and do version control and those types of things? Do they have a system that allows online testing and issues tracking, and how does that experience work? The more automated and the more technology the vendor has, the easier your life is going to be. Communications is easy. You know that you're paying for the work as opposed to paying for all the administration and management, and things are just going to be more successful. Now, since then, our world's much more complicated, and so when you're assessing the technology, it's not just about their internal support, but can they handle the things you're trying to do, whether it's gamification or social or XAPI or adaptive or portals or search engines. It's a lot more complicated all of a sudden. And it is one of the reasons our organization started forming alliances with companies that really understood their technology, such as Mike that was here earlier, because it's just impossible for us to keep up with everything going on. So we decided to take the route of finding people who already knew these things and form really good relationships with them. So what's your vendor's approach to being able to maintain the technology edge? Good? All right. And the last is talent. No, that's not the last. Next to the last is talent. All right. What's the qualifications? My former organization, you couldn't be an instructional designer unless you had a master's degree. Times have changed a little bit since then. This guy's working on his PhD. But we have the same conversation. I think, Michael, you and I have the same conversation that it's like Andy Warhol, who said anybody can be an artist, but very few people really are. Anybody can be an instructional designer, but very few people really are. Sometimes they're thrusted into the training role because they were a subject matter expert. Sometimes they've worked their way in because they really knew the authoring tool or something of that nature. So how are the staff within their organization? How are the roles defined, and where do they get those backgrounds? Some of the key personnel that you're looking for when you're assessing, again, it's not just the developers or the IDs, but think about how they do the writing. You know, what does their editor staff and QA staff look like? Think about how they do the media development. Their graphic artists, their programmers, those kinds of things. Make sure you're assessing all the different types of talent required to do the things that we're doing. And then last is innovation. All right, everybody loves to be able to do the fun stuff. It is a blast to sit here and walk around and look at all the really cool things that are available. But at the end of the day, you got to go back and roll out a compliance course, or you got to go out and re-architect your marketing university, and there's a lot of work to be done. And it's difficult to jump into innovation right away. So what you want from your vendor is one who's a step ahead of you. They're already adapting it, they're experimenting with it, they're failing at it, right? Give me something really fun and new and let me just fail like crazy at it before I bring it to you, because you don't want me failing on your dime. So when it comes to innovation, what are they doing behind the scenes? Are they publishing? Are they writing blogs? Are they writing white papers? What kind of research are they doing? How many thought leaders do they really have? So I've been part of really good organizations that had this one guy, right, this shiny object, and we'd send him to all of our clients, and they'd be like, wow, you guys are really innovative because you got that one guy, right? But he can only work on so many projects at one time. So how many thought leaders do they really have? How much work are they doing? Are they on stages and talking? That's a very, very important attribute to take a look at when trying to decide. All right, so it's in the book. There's a book signing immediately after this. Honestly, thanks for your patience. If you come up, I'll give you a copy of the book. There is a bunch of copies over there, so selfishly plug my own book out in the bookstore. But we both thank you for being here and being patient with us. And Frank, any closing remarks? All right. So, and thanks for sitting below. This is a really good-looking guy. And he's taller than me. This is really intimidating. But thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.